Hello, welcome to my tutorial for the Molly bag by Shamballa bags. I hope you enjoy. So what do we need? I am doing mine in cork, and I have cut out all my contrast pieces. So this is basically all the outer pieces apart from, excuse me, the main panel at the front. And I've cut out everything in preparation. And then I've also cut out all my lining pieces, the gusset, the zip pocket. I'm doing a slip pocket, and the two main panels, and that's in cotton. This is the main panels, this is the back one, and I've done this for the front one. Isn't it beautiful? So that's all the fabrics for the outer, and then of course we've got the foam. Now I like to sew my foam in. I never fuse it. It wouldn't fuse to the cork anyway because the heat wouldn't permeate through to adhere it. But I don't like fusing foam because when you turn bags and so on, it can wrinkle, and if you try and iron it, it will just actually get worse. So I never fuse. I sew it into the seam. So rather than cutting it 3/8 of an inch smaller than the pattern pieces, the main pieces, I leave them the same size, sew them in, and then trim the foam out of the seams. To do the foam pieces, you need to join the upper main panel piece to the lower main panel piece, and that's what I did to cut them out. Otherwise they're separate. That's all the materials for making the bag, plus I have actually already interfaced the lining fabrics. So you need your interfacing as well. You need to keep this handy from the pattern. It's the guide to the ends of the gusset, so you'll need that later on. As for all the other products I'm using, obviously I've got my thread with matching bobbin. I've got my clips that I use, and all the hardware I'm using. I'm probably going to install bag feet. I haven't decided yet. I have made this bag a couple of times and I didn't add feet, but I think I might add feet this time. The rectangle rings, magnetic snaps and their washers, and my bag label that I put on the lining, plus rivets. I haven't decided how many I'm going to use yet. When I did one before, I put the rivets around the edge of the flap, which looked really nice, but I don't know if I'll do that this time. I've got my 8-inch zipper for the internal zip with a zipper pull that I've already attached. And I've got my piping. You need 65 inches of piping. And it does say number 3, but I use number 4 because it's just slightly bigger and I prefer the look of that. Then we've got my standard double-sided tape that I live and swear by. Couldn't do without. And my Gutterman HT2 glue, which I also use all the time. My rotary cutter. Now this is an XOR, X apostrophe SOR. That's the make of it. And it's very hard to track down in the UK. Yeah, it's very difficult to get hold of, but I love this. It's the nicest feeling one I've ever had. I just prefer to use that. My scissors, Fisker dressmaking scissors, and then I've got my snippers for trimming my little threads, my heat removable pens. I've got white for the dark fabrics and I've got blue for the lighter fabrics. And then my twist punch with the poly board for doing the rivets with. And finally, two of my favourite gadgets. I've got my micro stitch gun, and that's exactly what it's called, micro stitch. It says Avery Dennison on this trademark, so that's obviously who makes it. I love this, and this is great if you've got bulkier layers, which obviously with the foam I will have, that you can use this to put the two sides together. It's brilliant around curves as well. No good if the layers are thin though, because the tags are so long that it would move. But my favourite latest thing is this stapler. Now it's different to your standard stapler, which is like that. As you can see, this protrudes quite far. This is very close to the edge, and this is great for stapling, and it's so easy to use. Even my arthritis, it's really easy to use. Staple around the curves and it doesn't move. Oh, it's fantastic for helping you go around curves. So, and then I just remove them afterwards easily with the staple remover. So that's a brilliant one to use. That's all the products. That's everything we're using. So now to get started. Oh, and the pins if I need them for the lining. And that's it. So that's everything I'm using. So you can see what we've needed to gather together. I've got my green machine for adding rivets. I don't know. Oh, so heavy. My green machine for adding rivets. And we'll get started. The first thing we need to do is to prepare the connector strips. So it's 9.5 inches long and 2 inches across. So just draw a line in the middle, and then getting our double-sided tape, I'll put a line of it either side of the line I've just drawn, or you could put it on the edges, whichever you prefer. And then remove the backing and fold into the centre. And then we're going to take it to the machine and stitch along both edges. Like so. I'm just going to get my roller, which I forgot to mention. It just gives a crisper edge. I have cut the pieces, the piece that we just stitched, into 4 equal pieces, and then we need our front panel piece and fluff on there. I'm getting my light marker, and we need this pattern piece to mark where the connectors need to go. And I can see through on the other side where that marking was. And we need to place this wrong side up so that you've got the split in the middle looking at you like that. And the same on the other side. Oops, it's alive. And now we want one of the exterior main panels, which is that one. And we lay this face down. Now, if you want to just base these in place to stop them from moving, you can do. I'm actually going to use a little bit of my double-sided tape, thinking about it. Just stops it from moving then. Put it really close to the edge because we're stitching at 1/4 inch seam allowance. So we don't want the double-sided tape to be showing once we've stitched. Like that. And I'm also going to put double-sided tape along the top here for putting the panel on. Again, very close to the edge. And I'm going to turn it around to do it. And then, so it's face down so that right sides are together basically. Like so. Then take it to the machine and stitch at 1/4 inch seam allowance. Alright, stitching at 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now we fold this up with the connectors as well, so the seam will be facing down. And I'm just going to use my roller Okay, I have a light coloured thread in the machine, so I'm going to have to swap it over for the dark one. So I've changed my thread to a dark brown, and now I'm going to top stitch. and I could hear that my thread was nesting. It didn't sound right, so I'm going to have to take that off and check my bobbin. Okay, I unpicked what I'd done. I don't understand it really, but I always test stitch, as you can see. When I put a new bobbin in the machine, I use a scrap piece of material to check that it's stitching fine, which I did. So heaven knows why that happened. I've sorted it out, and now I will try again to top stitch. I forgot to take the top thread out. I unpicked it from the back and forgot to remove. I shall try and make sure that I go over where I've been because of the holes, frustratingly. I'm sure I will be okay though. Yeah. Okay, let's try again. Better, as you can see. And you may think, why did I leave that bit in that shows where it went wrong? The reason why I leave these things in is so that if there's a solution, I can show you the solution, or I just like to show you that these things do happen to the best of us. So it's, if you're a new sewer and new to sewing or even just bag making, it lets you see that it does happen to everyone, and that it's not you. It's nothing to do with your inability to sew well. It honestly can happen to the most experienced of bag makers. Okay, so that's that part done, and now we're going to move on to the flap. Okay, so we have our flap pieces. Before we put the flap together, we need to add the snap to the underside. So we get our pattern piece, which I've put a hole in the centre, and we mark the placement, but I just had a thought. Because I've done this design, I don't want the flap to come down too far. So that's probably about where it would come to, which I don't want. I need it to be up higher. So I'm marking for the snap, but I'm pretty sure the snap is going to be down here. Now it might mark there, but if I have my sometimes you have to sort of hack your pattern. So I want it so that the corners are literally sat on the line, in which case I need my magnetic snap to sit slightly differently. It's worth showing you how to do this in case you have to do the same thing. So this is where the snap would be, which is going to be where I want my flap to be, in line with the border. So I'm going to move it down imagining it to be there. Just marked there. But what I want to do now is make sure I'm not going to be too close to the edge. So it's just a case of trial and error. If you have to hack a pattern for any reason, you just try to think ahead. So as you can see, that's where the snap will sit, and I'm going to be stitching very closely, but it's okay. I'm happy with that. And at the end of the day, if it doesn't work out, I have enough cork, I'll just make a new flap. So it's no big deal if it doesn't work. So I've marked the placements for the snap, and now, isn't this board cute? I got it with my new craft knife. Love it. My husband said little things, but there you go. But I can't help it. I love little gadgets. Okay, so I've marked for the snap. I've put it in, so you see how close I'm going to be stitching around the edge. But it'll work. And push the prongs out. Now, you don't have to add anything to your flap if you want it to be not too thick. Now, I'm not going to add anything firm or foam because I don't want my flap to be very stiff. It needs to come over nice and smoothly. If you make it too stiff, it could end up wanting to sit up like that. So I'm going to use some fleece, some fusible fleece, which I need to cut out. I'm going to cut that out, fuse it to this side, glue the two sides together, and then come back when I need to stitch it. I just popped back before stitching to show you with the foam or whatever you use, the fleece, sorry, don't go to the edges. Leave it 1/4 of an inch seam allowance from the sides, and leave about 1/2 inch seam allowance on the top to allow to reduce the bulk when it's stitched into the bag. Okay, so I've glued it and it's dried, and I just trimmed off any overhang on either side from the other side of, you know, the flap. So there it is. And because this is so close to the edge, I've changed my walking foot, which would have hit it, to my very narrow foot. So now to stitch. Okay, so I've stitched round, and I just want to check to make sure that there's no edges going past. So no, that's all pretty even and done. Now there is a possibility later on I might find I need to trim this, but I don't think I will. I think it's going to be all right. So that's it. Now we need to actually prepare the back piece. Right, I've marked is using this piece. I marked for where these connectors needed to go. I've used a bit of double-sided tape along the edge to stick them down, and then I lined this up centrally to make sure it was all evenly spaced out. And now we need to add this part. So as before, I'm just going to add some double-sided tape along the top just to hold it in place, because cork does have a habit of slipping even with clips on, because as soon as you take the clip off it wants to move. So I like to anchor it down. And then place this over evenly. Just slightly. That's better. Okay. And then stitch at 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. And normally, I've got 2 machines, and normally I'll have the second colour on another machine, but it means moving the camera and setting it up differently. So what I have to do is change the threads again back to the dark thread. Okay, so I've changed the thread, and now we top stitch. And that's that part done. And now we need to add the female part of the magnetic snap onto this piece. And as I said, I'm going to have to make sure that it's in the right place for where it will land. So that's where I want it to go. And what I'm going to do is get my chalk pen see if it will come off on here. Yeah, so it's left a circle for where I need to be. Oops, wrong way. So I'm just going to double check that it's exactly central. As they say, measure twice, cut once, and that's what I do. Measure everything to make sure. So that's at 9.5 inches. Oh no, 6.5 inches. Right, so oops, that's 6.5 there. And doing it the other way, that's 6.5 there. Okay, so that's good. And now I've got to find where I put the washer. Get another one out because I don't know what I've done with it. So let's mark just want to make sure, again, that's it. Okay. That's the lines marked. And just go through. And then add the female part. Oh, there was the washer. And then I'm going to get a piece of Peltex. And just glue it onto here. And press down. There we have it. Now this is where you can add your handmade label if you're adding one. If I'd have thought about it, I would have put it on here. It would have looked nice on there, but I didn't. I don't think I'm going to add one on this bag. I do wish I'd put it on there, but never mind. I shall wait for this to dry and then we'll proceed. I'll come back shortly. Now it's time to add the rectangles, the rectangle rings, should I say. I've already added this side, and I just thought I'd show you how to do this one. And basically, mark where you want to put them. Now I've marked 1/2 inch up from the edge, and then in the centre. And fold it over and tuck it right down at the bottom and make sure it's nice and even. And then I get my twist punch, which sometimes falls out. And then screw down all the way through. And then get my rivet, if I can pick it up. It's being very slippery. Put the ring on. Put the rivet through both parts. Through to the back. And then I'm just going to press this in my machine, which I can't really show you at the moment, but I'm sure you know what it looks like. And there we have the rivets attached to both pieces. And now on to the next part of the bag, which is to do the piping. So I'll get the piping sorted out and come back to you. One thing, before we add the piping, I nearly forgot that we need to add the foam to our panels. So I'm only going to baste it on so that it's easier to remove from the seams when we stitch everything together. So I'm just going to roughly baste, starting at the top. And stitch at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. And I don't want to go all the way around, I don't need to. And I just want to do the sides really. Slipped off. Okay, so that's the first panel. I'm just going to trim the foam off neat to fit properly, and I'll do the same with the other panel, and then I will come back to you. Now we need to make the piping like this. I'll show you how I made this. I started with putting some double-sided tape along the centre and not going quite to the ends because we're not sending the piping to the ends. And then I also put a piece on one side, so 1/4 of the way in. So we start by removing the centre piece. Now you don't have to do this bit. I do it so that the piping stays in place, and it just saves me fighting it to convince it to stay in the middle. But if you're happy not to use double-sided tape and just wing it, then by all means do. Okay, so that's stuck along there, and then we remove this double-sided tape and we just fold over so that the edges meet each other and press down firmly and keep going. And you want to go all the way to the ends. And the reason for not having any piping at the ends will become apparent. And then I just use my roller to give it a definite edge, so that the piping stands out. I'll show you what I mean when I've finished rolling it. So you can definitely see now, oh, wrong place, where the piping is. And then we take it to our machine, and I've changed my foot to a Teflon zip foot. And I don't go right up close to the piping in case you can see it when we've added it to the bag. It was more just to get it to keep closed for when we add it to the panel. Now we're going to add the piping like I have done so here, and I have started I marked the halfway point on the piping and I marked the halfway point on the bag, and I've been adding them with the micro stitch gun. If you don't have one of these, just use your clips. This is a nice thick layer, so this is working perfectly. This doesn't move. If it was thin, I'd have used the staple gun. The beauty about using the micro stitch gun is that you can leave them in place afterwards. They're harmless. If with the staples, because they're metal, I do remove them. And I've clipped all the way around where it curves. It's essential that you do this for the piping to go round the bend smoothly. Otherwise you're going to end up with lots of sort of wrinkles in your piping where it shows and it matters. So I just place a micro stitch around about every inch as we're going around the bend, and then I space them out sort of every couple of inches once we've gone round the curve. And as you can see, it's nice and quick and easy to do. And what I did with the other side was put them together to make sure I had the same height, and we do here, so I don't have to worry about cutting anything. So that's how quick and easy it is to use the micro stitch gun. And then we just tack it in place, baste it in place. So that's the piping basted in place on both of the main panels, and then we just need to get our gusset. Now I didn't have, I'm not sure if I said in the preparation or not, so I'll just say in case I didn't have a long enough piece of cork to do one long gusset length. And the gusset is meant to be 34 3/4 by 4 3/4. So I did 2 halves and sewed them together and then top stitched, and this now measures that length, which is fine. I mean, it will look absolutely fine. And what we need to do is, I've got that halfway mark already done, and I'll just put it in place on top. Sorry, clip it in place. I couldn't think of the word. And I'm just going to clip it a little bit, and then I'm going to get my trusty micro stitch gun. And honestly, this really does help so much, as you can see. And they're not very expensive either, so do get one if you can. I got mine from Amazon. I got it a long time ago though, about 8 to 10 years ago I think. I was still doing a lot of dressmaking then, so it must have been at least 8 years. And we just continue round. And if for some reason I found that it wasn't right, it's so easy just to snip these micro stitches, and it's actually easier than unpicking normal stitching. And the gusset meets beautifully at the top. Now sometimes, and I don't know why, when I made my last molly, this piece was too long by about 1 centimetre, which Sammy said to expect, that it's possible it could happen, in which case you just trim it to size. But this time round it's great. It fits perfectly. So, but don't worry too much if it doesn't fit. If it's, as long as the gusset's too long and not the bag, you're okay. That didn't quite go in that time. Just keep going round. Sometimes you might find you stab yourself. Keep going. And then once we've done this, we will stitch it on. There. And obviously you need that to be poking out because you're pushing the piping through. So it's essential that at the top of the piping you come out, which is why I stopped adding the piping around to there. It actually stops there, so it doesn't pad out on the seam. So that's why we stop short of the edge by 1.5 inches or so. And then we just, I completely forgot to say that, so I do apologise. I'll show it here as well, that as we come up, that's where my piping stops, and then we go off, and then once it's stitched it goes past like that. So that's why we do that. And then when we stitch this, we need to stitch it as closely to the piping as possible. We are using a 1/4 inch seam allowance, but you do want it to be butting up right against the piping. You don't want it to have a big gap. Now what we do is push this out and check, and you just want to check that, like there, that's a bit too wide for me, so I need to just go back over that corner piece. See, here it's perfect, and here I'm happy with it, apart from that one curve, in which case I just need to go back over that. Double check, and that's got it that time, and that's all you need to do really. So I'm going to attach the other side now and stitch exactly the same, and I will return. Okay, so I've attached both panels to the gusset, and I didn't add the foam yet. The reason being is with the extra foam added, it's just become so bulky to sew and stiffer, and I just find adding it to the gusset afterwards is easier than before. But I'm going to put a note before when I tell you to add these panels, so that if you want to add the gusset, you can add the gusset first. But I like to add it afterwards because it's just so much easier. And it's just a case of, I don't even pin it because it's just really quite easy to do. So I just, stitching within the seam allowance, just quickly add it like this. And we've not got the trouble of trying to attach the gusset with this attached, but that's my preference. Give it a go, because you may find that it is beneficial to you. Oh, slipped off. I'm going to carry on adding it to both sides and come back. Okay, I've added the foam, and all I need to do now is just trim the excess out of the seam allowance, which will be nice and easy, and turn it right side out. Alright, there she is, turned right side out. The final part we need to do is to use this pattern piece to do the gusset, trim the gusset. So I line it up and draw along it, and the same at the other end. Okay, and then we just, have I got this? I haven't got this in shot, have I? Oh, that's better. And then just trim. That's that end done. Sorry. And I'll do the other end, and that's the exterior completed, and then we're on to the lining. I just wanted to pop back and say that if you found your gusset pieces to be higher than the panels, trim them first, then do this part. Now we're starting on the lining. Now in the instructions it tells you to add the contrast band first, then do the pocket, but I'm doing it the other way around. And what we need to do is measure an inch and a half down. In the pattern, once you've added the band, then you add an inch down. And I also want room for my label, so I'm doing it an inch and a half down from the top. And I've got a piece of contrast fabric here that's 8 inches long and 1.5 inches wide, and I've cut a box out, basically 7 inches long and half an inch wide. I've put double-sided tape on the outside edges, and now I want to lay this down so that it's even on both sides, so it's right in the middle. So now that's 2.5 inches, and that's 2.5. So I'm happy with that being in the middle. I'm just going to double check by folding the panel in half. Yeah, they meet. So I'm happy. So I'm going to press that down fully. And would you believe I changed my thread, forgetting that I had to do this. So I'm going to have to change my thread again, and then I'll come back. Okay, I changed my thread and started stitching, but this cork is really stretchy, and it was just stretching and stretching as I stitched, even though I was using a walking foot, and you can see what's happened with the fabric. So I stopped stitching, and basically I just think this cork is just thin and stretchy. So I'm going to add some interfacing to it to give it some extra strength. Well, I'm going to do a new piece because I've stitched in this one and I've got holes in now, so I shall sort out a new piece and come back in a moment. But I wanted to show you what happened and what can happen. So I had a thought, and this cork is beautiful. It's not stretchy, so I decided to do the dark brown instead. I just think it's the best option. So let's start again. You can see already it's just so much better. Ordinarily I do stitch slightly closer to the edge, but because this is cork, if you stitch too closely to the edge it can tear it, so it's always advisable just to go in a little bit. So I sort of stitched at more or less 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So now we need to cut the fabric out of the centre. And I forgot I needed to get my applique scissors. Wherever they may be. Got them. Sorry about that. Okay, so I like to use my Gingham double curved scissors. They're beautiful to use. And cut the fabric out about 1/8 of an inch away from the seam that you've just stitched. I actually think these are starting to go a little blunt. I've had these for 8 years and they're just struggling a little bit, so I may have to invest in a new pair. They've lasted a while though. Okay, so now we've cut out, we need to put some double-sided tape along the inner edge of the zipper facing, so on the sort of around the box as such. And I start by just taking off the top piece of backing, leaving the bottom one on. Okay, I get my zip, make sure that the zipper pull is facing downwards, and then place this centrally over it. Like so. And then lift up and remove the backing off the bottom piece. Move the zipper pull up and then place this down. Like so. And then we get the zipper pocket piece, turn this over, put some double-sided tape on the bottom underneath the zip, peel the backing off, and then place the bottom line along the tape so that the fabric is going upwards, so it will look just like that. So right side is against the wrong side, and then we turn over and we just want to stitch along the bottom. Just move the zipper out of the way. Happy with that. Turn it back over, bring it down, the pocket lining down, finger press along there, and now we want to put double-sided tape along the top of the zip this time. Oops, nearly slipped off. Pull the backing off and fold the pocket up so that the edge goes along there. making sure the sides are even. And now we want to stitch the side of the box along the top and down the side again. Zip out of the way again. And there we have it. And now we just need to stitch the sides to complete the pocket. And that's it. That's our pocket complete. Now we're going to do the slip pocket on the other piece. I'm also going to have my label here, which I don't need to show you, I know. Right, I've added my label to this side of the lining, and now we're going to do the slip pocket, which isn't part of the pattern, but I like to add a slip pocket on the opposite side to the zipper pocket. And for this I've done fabric that's 11.5 inches long and 9.5 inches across, so that we'll end up with a piece that's roughly 5.5 inches down and 9 inches across. So we stitch 1/4 inch seam allowance. I've folded it right sides together. Stop here, leave a few inches and carry on. And you may have noticed that I double stitched on the corners. I stitched backwards, and that's because I just like to reinforce them, the stitches, for when we turn and we push the corners out, that the stitching doesn't sort of come apart or give way or anything. And I just like to make it extra strong so we don't poke any holes, etc. Okay, so what we need to do now is trim the corners. And I also trim at the top there. And then we turn it right side out. I'm just going to put the iron on because we're going to have to press. When I can get hold of it. And we push all the corners out. I just initially do it with my finger, and then I'll go back in with tool that I use. Okay. I'll get my tool that I use to turn to poke corners out with, by Clover, and just gently, I don't ever go forcefully because I don't want to break through the fabric. So push through like that. That's just not quite through, so push through with my finger first. I dropped the tool, so I'm sorry if you got the back of my head then. Just checking all the corners. Right, now if I just press that flat, I don't know if you can see, but it's a bit dark. This seam would fold in on itself and it wouldn't look very nice. So what I always do first is I pull it back like so, and I just iron that seam. And I do both sides. And yes, it does iron the fabric, but that's fine because in a minute we'll press it again and that will be fine. But we really need to press these two seams to get good results. And then we can now press it fully. And I wouldn't normally do this on my machine. I'm doing it just to show you. I need to get some steam in my iron, so I'm going to take this off and come back in a moment. Right, so I've pressed it nicely, and I've also, oops, wrong end, I've folded the seam in. So it's nice and neat, and I'm just going to add some double-sided tape so that it doesn't shift when I'm stitching it down, because they do have a tendency to do that. So we just do that. I've turned my iron off, but it's still hissing out steam. I don't know if you can hear it, but it's annoying. Okay, so press that down. And now we're just going to top stitch along the top to give a nice neat edge. There's that, and now we're going to lay it onto our lining piece. I got my second panel piece and I added the slip pocket to it. I placed it centrally, so each side is 2.5 inches, and I marked it 2 inches down from the top. And when we start, we just go backwards and forwards a few times to reinforce that top edge. My foot has a terrible trouble at the moment of picking up and dragging the corners down. So that's attached now. Now we get one of our lining contrast bands, which we're going to sew across the top at 1/4 inch seam allowance. And then we fold this up, and we want to top stitch with the seam facing down. Like so. I don't know if you can see it there or not, so I put it in the light. And we do the same with the other panel. And again, top stitch. So that's both panels prepared, and now we add the gusset as we did before. Oh no, we don't. No, we don't. We have to stitch the lining gusset pieces to the gusset. So 1/4 inch seam allowance. Open it up and top stitch. And the same with the other end. And that's going to be skew-iff. So I'm going to remove that and restitch it. And I have a little cheat that I do with my super sharp craft knife. There we go. And stitch again. And then top stitch again. So that's the gusset piece prepared, and now I'm going to attach it. I'm going to mark the centre of this, the centre of the panel, and attach it with pins and come back. I've attached one side of the gusset, and I made sure that I lined up the edges of the top and the bottom parts so that they're equal. And then we start off by stitching at 1/4 inch seam allowance, and then move out to 1/2 inch so that we have a nice fitting lining. And just so you know, I haven't got the lining mismatched. The interfacing didn't quite go to the edge. So I don't want you to think that I'm stitching very badly. Just be careful to line it up properly. And we need to leave a gap in the lining, and I'm going to leave as big a one as I possibly dare, owing to the fact that it's cork. And then we need to move back out to 1/4 inch. So that's the one side attached, and I'm going to pin the other side back and come back when I've done that. And we're going to do the same on this side, but we'll stitch all the way around. We don't need to leave a gap. And that's our lining stitched together. And I'm happy with that's what I was on about, to make sure that they match up as best you can. So I'm just going to remove the pins and then I'll be back. Okay, the one thing I did forget to do, whoopsie daisy, is add the magnetic snaps. No big deal, it's not the end of the world, they can still be done now. If anything, they didn't get in the way, so that's good. So we just need to line up the pattern piece, and we can still do it by going like this way. So we mark there, and we mark there. So we've got our 2 marks, and we just come across and do exactly the same opposite. Oops, dropping the pen, dropping this. It's because I'm trying to show it to you. I don't know if I managed to do that or not. Oh my goodness me. Okay, so we've lined up there, marked there, do the same across this side. I'm using this part to line up the pattern piece. There we go. And then I'm going to get the washers. And mark the lines by putting the hole over the dot that I marked. And final one. There you go. And then I get my craft knife and I want to do the holes. So we just go through like so. Do that on all 4. And I will add the snaps and then I will return to you, because you know how to add the snaps. I will come back when I've added them. I've added the snaps and I made sure that I had the female on one side and the male on the other side so that it looked uniform. I'm going to add some Peltex to the back and glue them on, and then I shall return when they're dry. Right, I've added the magnetic snaps and I put some Peltex on the back. And we need to shape the ends of our gussets now, like we did with the main one. So I just placed the pattern piece and drew the lines. And now we cut. Same both ends. Okay, so that's them done. And now we need to get our exterior and put it inside the lining and put the zipper part to the back. I always think it's never going to fit. Like putting a square peg in a round hole. But they do. Make sure you put the flap down inside. And I mean, already you can see it's a nice fit. So I'm going to clip it all the way around and come back. Okay, initially I did use some micro stitches, but because the bag isn't so thick, the bag was still slipping. So I've stapled it in a few places, which I'll remove easily afterwards. Just keeps them in place. So we're stitching 1/4 inch seam allowance. Turn the machine on, that would help, wouldn't it? Just want to press the it can be a bit awkward, but and try and make sure the seams stitch open. If you're worried about not turning in the right points, you could draw the line on, which would make it easier for you. So I just want to check that I have caught the bag in everywhere. Yeah, I'm happy with that. I'm going to remove the staples trim the foam from the seam allowance, and then it will be time to turn the bag the right side out. So I'd pop back and show you to cut the V out of the corners and cut the corners off these parts, and do that all the way round. I've trimmed the foam out of my seam allowance as well, and now I'm going to turn the right side out. Okay, now we're on to the straps. I've already made the one. Oh, and I didn't show you my top stitching. So I've top stitched all the way round, and I pinned everything down. I have shown on video. I've got a tutorial on YouTube about how to top stitch, so have a look at that, and that will show you how I do my top stitching, and I get brilliant results every time by doing it this way. Anyway, now for the strap. My strap measures 28 inches long. You can do it as long as you like, and it's 4 inches wide. I've drawn a line along the centre, and then I've laid double-sided tape either side, and then I've cut some Peltex that's 2 inches short at each end, so it's 24 inches, and 7/8 of an inch wide. It's just a little under an inch. And then I laid some double-sided tape along, and if you look, it's just 1/8 of an inch away from the centre line. This allows for folding. So I'm removing the double-sided tape, and then, oops, slipping everywhere. And then we just fold the tape, the edges into the centre to the line. Like so. And then fold this one in. Okay. And just press that down, and then put another row of double-sided tape on the outer edge. I mean, you don't have to use double-sided tape if you don't want to. I mean, if you think it's too expensive and a bit of a waste of money, that's fine. You do what you like, you use what you like, and if you want to just try and pin it in place, clip it in place rather, not pin, that's fine also. You really use what you like, but I use double-sided tape all the time, as you'll have noticed in my videos. So we're now folding it in to meet the sides, and I'm making sure that the sides aren't overlapping. Which I'll show you in a minute. Like so. And just roll it. Okay, so I've made sure that they don't overlap at all, and the first side we stitch down is the side that we met. We don't want to stitch on the folded side first. And the reason for not doing the Peltex to the very end is that we're going to be folding them up and over. And if it had Peltex in there, it would just be very bulky. Okay, and then you may find when you've finished that the ends are a little bit uneven. It's very, very slight, so I don't know if you can see that. So I just like to literally trim it to tidy it up and make it even. Let's see if the other end's worse. Yes. So you often find that can happen. So just trim it up to even it up. And now I'm going to show you how to add it to the bag. Okay, so I've attached the bags on one side, and the way I do it is I marked the end of the strap and I did 1/4 of an inch and then up 1/2 inch, like so, and then I punched the holes into it. Then I folded this over to where I wanted it to be, which is 1.5 inch fold, and used my pen to put in the holes to mark to then cut. I never cut 2 layers together because you can very often come out skew-iffed and not straight, so I do them independently. And to add it to the bag, make sure that you fold it like that and not the other way round. Now I've got 9mm long rivets here, and they're just a little bit too short. I really could have done with 10mm, but I don't have them. So it's a very, very tight fit, but it does fit. Just. So that's the first one in. And line it up in the green machine. That's the first one on. And the final one is you have to coax it to go through. That's it. And then again. So that's the bag done. Like so. Doesn't she look gorgeous? And then I made a tassel because I like to do things like that. And I just clip it on. So there's the bag. I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. Can't wait to see your bags in the group. I hope you post them. Happy stitching, and I'll see you soon with another tutorial. Please subscribe to my channel so you don't miss them. Bye.